And good evening, dear friends. Team HingoriSutras welcomes you to this session of In Conversation. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, change the world by changing yourself. Heal the world by healing yourself. Find a need and fulfill it. Service is the greatest form of spiritual practice. Everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace. To reach that point where service becomes our second nature, we need to first understand the true meaning of selfless service. Today, we have with us members of Team HingoriSutras, Tara, Kanika, Devraj, and Dhruv on this session. A very warm welcome to you all. आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है.
Good evening, Anjali. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Now, before we start discussing selfless service, I think we need to address a far bigger question, Devraj. What do you believe is the true purpose of life?
So, Anjali, I think to understand the true purpose of life, we have to first look into what this life is all about and what it's leading us to. And I think for most of us, at least it was my case for quite some time, that this life is all about achievements, ambitions, fulfillments of our desires, our joys and sorrows, and so many more other mundane struggles of the mind. Now, while you're caught up in all of this, I think you can't understand the true purpose of life. So the first thing that you need to do is to re-engineer this thought process, reconfigure this thought process. And I'll share with you how I did this. It happened through two incidences that seem to be supposedly random and unconnected and are spread over a decade from the other. So sometime in my teens, I was going for a walk and I bumped into my spiritual mentor, and I was obviously overjoyed to bump into him. And after I greeted him, I asked him what he was doing standing on the road. And he was standing on the road and he was looking up, and he wasn't looking at me, and he said that I'm strategizing my exit. I didn't understand what he was saying. He had an apartment in the building across, and that's where he was looking. So I thought he's basically making a plan to sell his apartment in that building. So I left it at that, and I thanked him. We had a nice conversation. And I went off. There was, probably a decade after this, an equally random conversation and an equally random statement by him actually helped dawn this realization on me. He told me, he said, to learn to live, strategize your exit. That day, I understood that there's so much more to our existence than this life. The life that we lead, this birth that we've taken, is actually an opportunity. It is a medium, this birth on this planet, a tool to potentially move to a higher dimension, a higher loka, to experience these higher lokas. So I think one has to look at the purpose of life beyond just this life, at our existence beyond this life. And one has to work towards the progress of the soul, which transcends these mundane struggles of the body and the mind and transcends across lifetime. That, according to me, is the purpose of life.
Absolutely, Devraj. And while there are so many ways and means to elevate the soul spiritually, the one that comes first to the mind is Seva, serving others, expecting nothing in return. It is irrefutably the simplest way to evade the snake and climb the ladder in the game of karma. So let's delve deeper into understanding what is Seva. Kanika, what do you think is Seva?
Thank you, Anjali, for the question. Very good evening to all of you. So the question asked today is, what is Seva? Now, I must tell you one thing. Before I share my thoughts, I have to tell you that it's a very plain vanilla kind of concept, and yet it's very, very profound. So Seva in very simple terms means selfless giving or selfless service. And put even more simply, it means acts of kindness. Now, selfless, as we all know, is the antonym or the opposite of selfish. So that means any act of kindness done for selfish reasons does not count as seva. When I say selfless, I mean one should not be accepting anything in return, and nor should one be even expecting anything in return against the seva or the service or the giving that you do. Yes, expecting anything is also not permissible. It's like, we're on a diet. And then if we salivate looking at some dessert, we still put on weight, don't we? So no accepting and also no expecting. Now, this philosophy of seva, I learned and understood from my guru, who leads by example totally. And of course, from this book, Karma Sutra, Decoding the Karmic Code, right here I have it, written by him. Now, this book offers many ways of doing seva, which will help you create a rich karmic balance sheet loaded with good karmas. And each one of us must go through it. It's really, really interesting. Now, in his doctrine of spirituality, my guru says that seva is one of the most important aspects for ascending the ladder of spiritual evolution and must be focused upon predominantly for one's growth. Help others without taking anything in return. It seems like a rather unconvincing process, I'm sure, to connect with the inner self, which is such a profound thing, but it works wonders. Now, all of us may wonder, how would it work? So, when we say, I did some seva, who is that I that we're talking about? Is it me, the physical Kanika, or is it me, the spirit inside? So initially, when we do seva, we do it for our own personal benefit. Like we've always learned in school, as you sow, so you reap. So we will get good by doing good. There is something to gain from doing seva. Because most actions we perform in our daily lives are always linked to the sustenance of our physical body. And that's absolutely normal and totally human, till we go deeper. Over time and constant practice, as seva becomes more of a habit, the connection inward begins to strengthen. Because one starts to understand that seva is actually benefiting the soul, our spirit. And these acts of kindness are acknowledged by the spirit within, and they get recognized as actions performed for its evolution. In due course, lo behold, as we work in the benefit of others, our own self-worth increases and realization dawns that there is a spark of divinity within us. And the same divinity is within each one of us. We all are nothing but a part of the same consciousness supreme. So intrinsically speaking, it's like you're serving yourself, isn't it? But seriously speaking, our aura gets stronger. We earn a lot of afterlife currency needed by the spirit body to move to higher lokas, just as 𝗕𝗵𝗷 mentioned. And one thing I'd like to mention is that we must understand that when we practice these acts of selfless service, we may not feel that there's any visible or tangible differences that are taking place or any experiences that we see or observe or feel. But please remember that the spirit is watching. Changes are happening. The sanskars are changing, and the spirit is the true beneficiary. So our audience, be kind, be empathetic, be sensitive, be compassionate, be selfless. And last but not the least, you must be humble. And before I end, I would like to say, don't procrastinate. Go out and do that little act of kindness. Because like Sant Kabir said so rightly, Kaal kare so aaj kare so ab, pal mein pralay hoegi, bahuri karega kab.
Beautifully put, Kanika. Dhruv, it was so, Kanika explained it so extensively to what is seva. So what do you think is then not seva?
Good evening, everybody. At start, one must not worry if the seva is selfless or not. The evolution from selfish to selfless seva, or the shift from sympathy to empathy, is a gradual process of evolution. A child in elementary school is taught to paint the sky blue. However, at a much later stage, does he actually realize that the light from the sun is actually white, and the moment it enters the Earth's atmosphere, due to the scattering of the light, it gives it a blue hue, which we perceive as a blue sky. So was the teacher actually wrong in the elements preschool? Or was it necessary for the evolution of the child to actually start with a blue sky, because that is how he perceives it? What do you think about this, Anjali?
Dhruv, that's really beautifully put, So it's, for me, what I understand is spiritual evolution is a multiple step process. With each step, you move further in your journey towards recognizing the divinity within. This, though, needs to be experienced through practice and cannot just be internalized through reading.
So when we actually do acts beyond our role play or our work, it classifies as seva. Secondly, if a transaction is involved, that means there is some give and take, it does not classify as seva. Seva must always be a one-way transaction. That means we only give and take nothing in return. No money, no gifts, no recognition, and at a much later stage, not even a thank you. It certainly must not be a barter system, else the purpose is lost. It is also very important to understand that even if we take an iota in return, however minuscule it may be, at that moment of time, compared to what we have done for the other person, the purpose of seva is lost. Let me give you an example. Teaching is a very noble act. However, if the teacher takes a salary for his act, then it cannot be classified as seva. However, if the same teacher stays back after school hours and teaches a bunch of students who need some extra help and does not take anything in return, that classifies as seva.
Yeah, that's quite true. But, I'm a little confused here, Kanika. So to whom are we doing seva?
I know it's like a yo-yo. Is this seva or is this not seva? But
Yeah.
in my experience, what has happened is that me very in the nascent stage, of course, and most times we have this notion that when we think of seva or service or charity, it must involve a lot of money, and only then does it make sense. It's like writing a check of X amount of money to an NGO only qualifies as seva or charity. But I'd like to really clarify here that such is not the case, most definitely not. Because seva is nothing but an attitude. It's actually a way of life. Because seva is never quantitatively measured. It is only measured qualitatively. It is not the quantum of money or time or effort that one spends. It is just the intention of the desire to do good. And that is all that matters. So the moment your intention is in the right place, the opportunities to do seva will crop up in the strangest of times and places. But if you live with awareness, if you have this gyan that this is how it should be and this is how we should function, you shall automatically rise up to that occasion, because your spirit itself will tug at your strings of empathy to perform that act selflessly. And Anjali, note that I say empathy and not sympathy.
Yeah.
It's a subtle difference, but makes all the difference,
Yeah, one without emotion. And
exactly. Yeah,
absolutely.
But is it easy? It is actually, I have to give credit to the fact that it is the guru who helps us understand this importance of seva, to rediscover yourself. And he constantly makes us realize that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Also, something very interesting I would like to point here is that, seva is not limited to helping only humans. It also includes helping any living creature, be it the animal kingdom, the insect kingdom, and even the plant kingdom in any manner possible. In fact, the acts of seva may be performed by you, but the benefits of which, if attributed to your ancestors or dedicated to them, it actually accrues to their spirits, and it hugely benefits them to pass over. So the next thing which arises in my mind, that probably arises in most people's mind, that is it difficult to participate in seva? Do you think so? Is it very time consuming? Is it expensive? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Seva begins as an act of service for someone else, anyone else really. And it actually is finally Seva to yourself and your soul.
Right.
And like you mentioned earlier, why we must do Seva. Tara, what are your thoughts? Why should one do Seva?
So, as we've already established, inside our physical body, we also have a spirit body. Now, the problem of living in this rat race of the human existence is that we spend 99% of our time, energy, efforts, and finances on only pleasing our physical body. We want better relationships, we want a bigger house, we want a bigger car, we want a better family life, etc., etc. And this rat race, more often than not, leads us to unhappiness. It takes us down. It's like reaching the snakes in the snakes and ladder game. Most humans are unhappy. They have suffered from a lot of low self-esteem. Riddled by negative emotions. Now, what happens is that when one starts to engage in acts of seva, acts of kindness beyond yourself, looking out for other beings, as Kanika mentioned, whether it's a plant, whether it's a human, whether it's an animal that needs help, your spirit finally starts to feel like, hey, my physical body actually remembers I exist and it wants to nurture me, it wants to look beyond me. And it finally feels like the physical body is not just acknowledging and nurturing it, but wants to bring a stronger relationship with it. And this stronger unison between the physical and the spiritual is a sure shot tool to get yourself out of the negative emotions that we all suffer. You can go to therapists, you can pop antidepressants, but those are all short-term solutions. If one engages in seva, you're definitely going to be in a better mental space.
So what you're actually saying is that seva is the means to connect with your inner being and find that divinity within, and seva can be as simple as making someone laugh, or it could be doing some charity donation for somebody's education, or spending hours serving food at a langar. These are just some of the examples that have come on the top of my head. But is there a limit to how invested one must be in seva? To what extent can or should one be, take seva? Devraj, what do you think about that?
Actually, Kanika and Tara have gone into so much of depth of what seva is and, to whom should seva be done, that it actually took me back to, remembering one, and I hope you don't get upset with me, Anjali, for this, but remembering one nice Hindi film song that, very old song, but, when Kanika was saying about seva encompassing everyone and to everyone, and all of us on this panel is discussing about selfless seva.
Right.
Very nice song of...
which one is that, Devraj?
I'll tell you about Kishore Kumar and Manna De, one of the two, I can't remember who. But the words are very, very relevant to what we are discussing today. It says that तुम बेसहारा हो तो किसी का सहारा बन जाओ.
Okay, let me just look up.
हो तो किसी का सहारा बन जाओ, कश्ती किसी की किनारे तक पहुंचा दो, तुम्हें किनारा खुद ही मिल जाएगा. I think that is what seva is.
Okay, I've just looked up this song on YouTube. Let's play it for our audience, Devraj.
तुम बेसहारा हो तो किसी का सहारा बनो, तुम बेसहारा हो तो किसी का सहारा बनो, तुमको अपने आप ही सहारा मिल जाएगा, कश्ती कोई डूबती पहुंचा दो किनारे पे, तुमको अपने आप ही किनारा मिल जाएगा.
Fabulous.
So Anjali, the point to be thought about is there's so much we learn from everything around us, right? And the same is true for mythology or Hindi music or anything of that sort. But so how is it correlated to the concept of extent of seva? Just think about it. In your daily life, in all our daily lives, what do we receive in return for everything that we do? If you ask this question to most of us, the answer will be nothing. more often than not, anything that you're a part of, you may not get a reward for it. Possibly, it may not make you richer. You may not even get a thank you for it. You may not even get the result you set out to achieve in that task. Correct?
Yes.
But reverse it and think about a day when you don't stop by to think what you're trying to do. When you don't stop by to think of the return, that day you get everything. It all comes back to you. And why does it come back? I mean, I understand this concept of selfless seva, but to begin with, and to a large extent, seva is the most selfish thing in this world that you can do. To help someone is absolutely the most selfish thing that one does.
Okay. And how? Why do you say that, Tevraj?
Because the gratification, the goodness, the happiness that you get by helping someone, there's no better feeling than it, right? Within the gamut of emotions, tell me what is a better feeling than it? Can jewelry give you that feeling? Can buying a house give you that feeling? Can having a lot of bank balance give you? All of those are requirements which you need to fulfill certain other aspects in life. But they won't give you the joy that this selfish act would give you. It is this joy of helping others. Trust me, it is this joy of helping others that actually is the key to our success in the afterlife.
Okay.
Why? You know why? Because when you're helping someone, when you're truly helping someone with, as we say, our heart and our soul, what we are actually doing is helping that self in the other or in the soul of another that we perceive as ourselves. Ourself in the soul of another.
Right.
There's a lot of depth to this concept of seva. So how do we do it in a simple way to answer the concept of extent? At any point of time, anybody, what did Tara say? What did Kanika say? At any point of time, anybody wants anything, or you sense that they want anything, don't wait for the person to ask you. Just reach out. The key is don't stop to think. Don't bother about the reward of seva. Don't struggle and don't get worried with the outcome of partaking in the act of seva. The Bhagavad Gita captures this very well. You do know this, and so do all our panelists, because we've obviously interacted with each other so many times that I'm also a huge fan of mythology. And Mahabharata being a prime aspect. And that background score of B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata has always fascinated me. But what does it say? You remember the old B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata, Anjali?
Yeah.
It says, Karmanneva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phal hetubhu mate sangoshta karmane. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it means that, what Krishna tells Arjun then is that what is in your scope, or what is it that you can do, is the act, and partake in the act. Don't worry about the reward of that act. The fact that you partake in that act is a reward by itself, is the fruit by itself. So don't worry about the concept of extent.
Very true. I read this quote by Guru Ramdas, where he says, helping out is not some special skill. It's not the domain of rare individuals. It is not confined to a single part of our lives. We simply heed the call of that natural impulse within and follow it where it leads us. So it really beautifully puts it as to where all we need to do is connect within. But Devraj, how is what we've just spoken about? There's just one more question that comes to my mind, and that is when. Very often we get stuck in this whirlpool of physical existence, and we're burdened with our problems, responsibilities. We do have the intent, mind you, but the time just doesn't seem right. How would you address that?
You see, so many times, each one of us, we all have our own challenges, our own difficulties, our own unique situations on a daily basis. Correct? That's what you're trying to say.
Absolutely.
And how does one then go through this whole science of seva, as they say, during this? I think the key aspect, and I think Dhruv touched upon this, the key aspect is when you look at seva as an attitude. You don't look at seva as a, end by itself or by you leading to the means of that end. One thing which I think all of us have learned on this platform is that your unique situation or your challenge in life or your difficulty that you face in life does not necessarily impede you from being of service to someone else. There'll always be someone, some being whose life you can make a difference to, whose life you can touch while going through your own struggles and while going through your own challenges. You can always make a difference to someone else's life. And you know what's the beautiful thing? As you're doing this, as you're going through this, more often than not, you will start finding solutions to your own problems, your own challenges.
किनारा खुद मिल जाएगा.
हाँ, क्योंकि जब आप किसी, without getting emotional about it, जब आप किसी और का problem या किसी और की तकलीफ या किसी और, even if you give a listening ear to someone, there is so much of energy, so much of positivity that gets exuded in that whole interaction, that automatically nature, Prakriti supports you to start finding solutions for your own situations, for your own problems.
True. So, the thought that once I'm free from my responsibility or once this trouble is over, I would do this, and that intent that we have, but where we keep postponing the action. Here, I would say the question to ponder, dear audience, is how much time do we think we have?
I think, sorry.
Now. Yeah. Tell me, Dev.
No, please continue.
So like what Devraj said, it is about, you are going through a tough time, but it is about putting that aside and putting someone else before the self, is what I understand from Devraj. Yeah. And with this, I feel it is important to understand how seva works. What does it really do to you, Dhruv?
Actually, to understand this better, I think we need to analyze from both the physical and the spirit bodies. At the physical level, when the receiver of the seva mentally sends his blessings, his gratitude, or his duas, it adds to the aura of the person doing the seva. Secondly, if the person doing the seva accepts the ownership or the doership of that seva, then he accumulates bhog or positive karmas which fructify as pleasures, prosperity, riches in future lives. And thirdly, I think the act of participating in regular seva yourself actually changes your guna mix to a more rajasic and sattvic qualities. Hence, it is so important that each one of us participates in seva yourself. Try and do as much as possible yourself. At the spirit level, if the person doing the seva does not accept the ownership or the doership of that act, then he accumulates yog or spiritual evolution in future lives. And regular participation in seva through one's life actually enhances one's self-worth and self-impression. And this is very, very important for the spirit because it leaves the physical body in a very elevated state of being, as detailed by Tara and Devraj.
Yeah. Dhruv, this reminds me of another beautiful saying after hearing all four of you that I read recently by Hafiz. The sun never says to the earth, I owe you. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. But tell me, if Seva has such a profound effect on your soul, at the end of the day, is it a selfless act or is it a selfish act? What do you think, Tara?
So, to answer this question, I'd like to share my personal experience with the concept of Seva. My guru introduced me to the concept of Seva in his book called Karma Sutra. And he basically outlined the importance of this physical human life. It's the only opportunity we get to do seva. In the spirit world, it's quite difficult to accumulate good merit and do this seva. So hence the importance of this human existence. Once I understood this, I was in a big hurry to engage in many, many acts of seva. And the first emotion that I went through, which I would say was quite selfish, was greed. Let me do as much seva as possible, as quickly as possible, so that I'm born better looking, richer, with better relationships, etc., etc., etc. So there was a huge amount of greed attached. Then there was fear. There was fear because we all know that we're going to die. And when we're going to die, we're going to be answerable to ourselves. So we better have done something good in this life. So it was all motivated by fear. And lastly, there was vanity involved. There was vanity because in the days of social media, post pictures of yourself doing langars, planting trees, then count how many likes you get, even share these pictures with your guru and then wait eagerly for a pat on the back from him. So this was the vanity involved. So seva riddled by all these emotions is definitely selfish seva. And there's no judgment attached because I think everyone on this forum has started there. And we all have to start there. Seva has to start as a selfishly motivated act.
Tara?
True.
Tara?
Yeah.
The 𝗕𝗵𝗷 here. Listen, I don't mean to, interject what you're saying, but, I'm going to request you. Do you remember we once met in Dehradun and we had this wonderful conversation about how you discovered the difference between attaching emotion and desire to seva and then being desireless about seva. I thought maybe I could request you to just share this with Anjali and our panel and everyone in the audience.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, we've just discussed the selfish aspect of seva. As one grows, evolves, learns on the journey which we're all on, one reaches the selfless aspect of seva. But selfless seva also has two parts. I would say the first phase of selfless seva is still very motivation and enthusiasm driven, because one does come to the realization that, okay, let me take myself out of the equation. Let me take my own feel good out of the equation, but I must water this tree. I must feed this, hungry person on the street. And, I must give back to society. I've been blessed with so much. I have the means, the tools, the wherewithals, the finances, and the grace of the guru who's guiding me to do all of this. So it's still, if one can see, has a fair amount of emotion underlying it. And this is the first phase of selfless seva, where one is able to take oneself out of the equation. And it's quite a sweet spot to be in. But then there's the second and much harder to articulate and much harder to actually even get to phase of seva, which is when seva becomes purely mechanical. And this, said is really the concept of non-doership, where seva becomes so routine. It's like brushing your teeth. It's like eating your lunch with no expectation, no emotion. You are just enacting these acts, but with no emotion attached. So 𝗕𝗵𝗷, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. It does, Tara. And I think it's really wonderful how you transcended that journey to reach this.
I have a question here from the audience to throw to you guys here. If seva is a selfish act, how does one not feel guilty? It's open to the panel.
Can I take this, Anjali? Can I share one?
Yeah, please.
I have a very nice, interesting story on the concept of guilt in seva. So, there was a time when I used to feel guilty not about participating in seva or being of help to someone, but I used to feel guilty about what I used to think, just like what Tara said right now, about the emotion attached with seva. So I'll tell you what happened was that one day, my spiritual mentor praised me for participating in an act of seva. And he felt it was very commendable, the way we had all participated in that act. And while he was praising me, I started feeling extremely guilty. You know why I felt guilty? Because that was a phase in my life when one of the prime motivators for me to participate in any act that we called Seva today was when people said thank you to me. It gave me a sort of a big kick or a sort of a high.
Satisfaction.
Yeah. I think more than a satisfaction, it made me feel very good when people said thank you to me. And I felt somewhere, that this praise from him or this sort of whatever he said about me was undeserved. And that guilt starts eating you up. So what did I do? The next day I went and I met him and I confessed to him. I told him that, I'm extremely sorry, but what you said about me yesterday, the prime motivation or the prime factor that drives me to do this is that when the person at the other end says, thank you to me, it makes me feel very good. So, you know what he did next? It's very funny, but it's actually true. He, there was a restroom, a washroom next to where we were standing and interacting. And he told me that, why don't you go there and flush the tank? Now, I honestly didn't know what that meant or why that was required, but I didn't say no to him. I went and I flushed it and I came out. So he said, what did you feel? I said, nothing. You asked me to go and flush it. I flushed it. I came out. So you know what he said next? He said, that's the way you'll feel one day about the concept of Seva. Till that day, your selfish behavior of wanting that thank you, of requiring that thank you, is actually benefiting someone else. Don't feel guilty about it.
Lovely.
Don't feel guilty. Just move on.
Fabulous. So even if Seva is done as a duty, you get stuck with these ideas like I'm doing it as a duty. Then now there's a confusion here. I can see in Namrata's mind. She's put this question here that is it a selfish or a selfless act? So what would you advise her to do? Again, Kanika?
Well, I think it's all right to start selfishly because that is how it begins for each one of us. And slowly and steadily, as you do it, it becomes like a monotonous act. And once it becomes a habit, it automatically becomes selfless. And there may not be any tangible difference you'll see or something which you will experience suddenly that has made it from selfish to selfless, but it just happens. And sometimes many things are not explained by logic, some things are just as they are. So even if it starts selfishly, let it start. But one day it will become selfless and without you even realizing it.
And without the label of duty attached to it.
Absolutely.
Anjali, I think our business is not the business of judgment.
Absolutely.
Seva has to be done without judgment. I mean, you look at nature, Prakriti. Prakriti doesn't judge anyone. Prakriti is an impersonal witness, right, to the act. What is nature? It's an impersonal witness to the act.
Yeah.
When we judge, when we introspect so much, when we contemplate so much or procrastinate so much, we're actually creating a lot of karma to all of this.
Yes.
Why should we be involved in this cause and effect?
Yeah. So here is what once when Dhruv and I were talking, and we were discussing Seva and how this is again, I think this answer Dhruv would probably give it to Bharat. His question is, if Seva is for the self, then how will we become karma mukt? So Dhruv, you remember we were talking about non-doership. So could you just sort of expand on that?
Actually, so if we do not accept the ownership of the act, then we do not participate in that seva. If we let's put it in a way that if we are actually taking the ownership of that seva, then we actually add to our positive karmas which fructify in future lives. But if we do not take the ownership of that act and it actually becomes just an habit of ours, then we do not accept any future liabilities.
Right. Right. Yeah. So basically, it is at some point when it becomes a habit is like how you brush your teeth, and you stop attaching any emotions to it, being non-judgmental about it, being, and there's no thought put into what your action, you would automatically sort of detach from your actions, from what you're doing, what is seva, right?
Certainly, this is a gradual process. It has to start selfishly. There has to be an ulterior motive to doing something, else no one would ever actually do it. If I look at my process of evolution on the seva path, I started doing seva. I bought a concept of doing seva selfishly because the more I did seva, I thought the benefit is for me. Later on, I felt that I should actually be grateful to the person who actually gave me the opportunity to do that seva. Much later, that didn't actually turn into a habit. So
True.
These are the gradual processes which one goes through. So one must not be like Devash put it, we cannot be judgmental on which stage we are in. We know
Absolutely.
where the end point is to go to evolution, where we need to evolve up to, and then keep that at the back of our mind and keep progressing slowly and steadily.
Yeah. In fact, so that's what I was saying. When you become non-judgmental, at some point you detach. When you detach, here, you identifying with your actions also sort of reduces, which helps you to get rid of the ego, which is attached to the act of the seva. Tara, you were explaining this as to your processes. So could you just throw a little bit of light on that?
I'd like to actually, because, I get asked this question a lot, that if I become emotionless when I'm doing seva, I won't do it with as much gusto and I won't do it as well. So people have asked me this, but won't I play a better role, a better wife, a better mother, a better sister? If I have that emotion, wouldn't I do it more sincerely? But the truth is that this emotionlessness and detachment from the act of seva benefits you at two levels. It benefits you at the physical level because you can actually perform these roles better when you're less emotional about them. That is the short shot. That's the benefit at the physical level. At the spirit level, Dhruv has beautifully outlined this, where he said that, being karma mukta is perhaps the intention of everybody that takes birth. And detaching yourself from the act makes you karma mukta. But there's definitely a benefit I would like to add even at the physical level. And I would like to clarify to the audience that being emotional does not make you better at any of the acts of seva that you're going to do.
Yeah.
I think, Anjali, sorry, I think, you actually hit the nail on the head in a very simple word that you said. What was it you just said a minute or two back before Tara explained to us this concept?
Detach from it, so the ego.
Correct. But what did you say before that?
Tell me, what did I say before that?
You spoke about identification.
Sure. Right.
See, I think, to answer Bharatji's question in context of what Tara and Dhruv said, I think it's this identification. See, we are constantly identifying, right, with this experience of the body, the mind. It's the freedom from this identification, like you said, that can actually give us karma mukti. And there's no desire then at that stage for either liberation or bondage, but they both presuppose the other, right, at that stage. So it's freedom from identification. And, at that stage, that does not mean you're going to necessarily exit this life or any life form that you're in at that point of time, or exit existence. But it's a stage where, you're basically living out your prarabdha karmas, right? And till they get exhausted, you'll continue living out this experience. But you're as good as non-existence. Because again, what you said, there is no ego, there's no motive attached at that stage.
True. True, Devraj. Now taking this forward, Ankit Verma has a question here saying that how can we detach from the outcome of seva and do it selflessly all the time? So can you give some examples of how it can be done, or what are the qualities that we must develop to detach from the outcome, or what can we do? To my mind, one of the things, if I can add, is surrender your seva or your action to the higher consciousness. Do not take ownership of that act. But Devraj, how would you say we could take this forward?
Well, once you understand the concept of surrender, then there's nothing that's left, to add. But I think some of the key qualities, and I'll request Dhruv, Kanika, Tara, all of them to add. I think there are some qualities that one can cultivate. Look at this concept of seva. Like, for example, I'd say an important quality is the quality of humility. Humility is a key determinator. Humility does not mean humility in speech or humility in our talk or the way we portray ourselves. Humility actually is the humility of the soul. The fact that the soul realizes that that being that is there in us is there in everyone else. I remember this, once I had a discussion with my spiritual mentor, and I feel that I told him that, I feel a part of his consciousness. I feel that our consciousness is one. And he told me that day, he said that, that's very fine, that's very good. But do you feel the same way about that mosquito who's going to suck blood out of you? Or, do you feel that way about a plant or of that ant? And the day you can, feel that way about every being around you, whether it's a stone or an ant or anyone else for that matter, the day you feel that oneness of the consciousness, that day, you will look at seva, or you'll imbibe the quality of approaching seva with a lot of humility. Because somewhere in the core of yourself, you realize that you're actually only serving yourself.
Right. True. So which quality, Tara, which quality do you think one must have to do seva?
I mean, the one that I would like to say is intent, intent, intent. As Kanika mentioned, there's no quantification to seva. And intent would translate into the fact that try and make every interaction that you have an interaction where you can give something, and make that so hardwired in your psyche that it becomes mechanical. It's not that you're walking into a room or walking into a place and you're like, oh, what can I do? What seva can I engage in? It should be so hardwired into your mindset that it should just flow seamlessly. And if this intent is constantly with you, I think you're going to be in a very good place.
Right. Kanika, what about you?
Like Tara said, naturally flowing from intent, I would probably say non-doership. Because even once your intent is in the right place and you're always in that mode of giving without even kind of realizing, seva becomes a way of life, like an attitude. But yet at some point, you must understand the concept of non-doership. So I feel non-doership is a very important aspect, because the moment you realize that you are not the doer, you are just the medium, you have just got these opportunities to be the medium to serve, is when seva becomes a step for your spiritual evolution on the spiritual ladder. So I think non-doership.
Quite agree with you. And Dhruv, what would you think?
I think as long as you take the ownership of doing that seva, that constant yo-yo is going to continue with you. The moment you actually, as Kanika just pointed out, the moment you actually consider yourself actually just being a medium, then that gratitude comes into yourself. And you do it emotionlessly. So something which I would like, which I think a quality which I think is very important, is empathy. That's basically sympathy without the emotions is what is very important.
Quite true. Quite true. Let's I quite agree with you, and what I feel is also another quality, we've discussed it. In fact, all of you've mentioned it at some point, is being non-judgmental, because you have egoism, hatred, jealousy, idea of superiority, all this come up at some point. So when this sort of vanishes, there is humility, there's pure love, there's empathy, there's tolerance, and there's mercy developed. A sense of separateness is annihilated, and selfishness to some extent is eradicated. So you get a broad outlook of life. You begin to feel that oneness or unity with every living being. You develop a broad heart with broad, generous views. And eventually, that's what, brings you to the knowledge of the self. You realize one and all in one. Ek se anek, and ek se ek, is what I feel.
Can I share, with your permission, how I just learned this recently, and it's something that stayed with me, about how Gurudev beautifully encapsulated this concept of seva. With your permission, I'd like to share this with the audience.
Please do. I was just actually going to ask you, about Gurudev's philosophy. In fact, that question was put up by Rishabh there as well. Yeah, please do.
Recently we've been hearing this audio biography of Gurudev, the podcasts, so immortalized his teachings and his philosophy and his life. And there was this one line in one of those podcasts which stayed with me. And, then I tried to understand more about it. And it's a beautiful story which ends with such a simple yet insightful way in how Gurudev explained the concept of seva. So, Gurudev was known for all these camps that he used to conduct, right? While he led this parallel life of a householder and a working professional, and yet a guru to so many lakhs of people. Like even the HingoriSutras, all the books discuss about all these camps that he held every year. So on one such camp, he'd taken his family along with him. And this story actually was told to us by Renuji, Gurudev's daughter. And she said, this was a camp that took place in Mussoorie. So while the camp was going on one day, people, used to, this, all of us know this, people used to come and meet him till the wee hours of the morning, right? And people were all there, and he had a habit of not eating while everyone was still there waiting to meet him. So it was getting very late, and I think Mataji went once and asked him, to have a little bite or have some meal or something that he'd like to eat, since it was getting quite late. And then I think someone else went, Induji went and told him. But finally, it was around, I think, 3:34 in the morning by the time the last lot of people left, and he'd not eaten anything. So Renuji went and requested him that, now that everyone's gone, why don't you at least eat something? So he went along with her to the kitchen, and Induji was there in the kitchen at that time. And he first asked Induji, he said that, have you eaten your meal? So she lied. She said, I have eaten. She lied because she wanted to ensure that at least now Gurudev should eat. She was worried that if she says that she's also not eaten, he'll first want to serve her. And from what Renuji explained to us, there was very little food left in that plate. So Gurudev, I think, got this false anger, this emotion of false anger. And he told her that you're lying to me and you've not eaten. And then he took all the masala from the kadhai. He got all the sabzi together with the masala, rolled it into the chapati, made 2 halves of the chapati, and gave the first half to Induji. And you know what he told Renuji before he ate? And I am not you'll have to improvise this because my Punjabi is very poor, but he told Renuji this. He said that जब तक खिलाने का स्वाद पै जाए तो खान विच मजा नहीं आता.
जब khanda, khilanda swad pe jaye to khanda maza nahi aanda.
So why don't you explain
when
to
you
audience what
want
that
to
means?
feed, when you love to feed people, you're no more interested in eating anymore.
That's Seva, I think.
That's
Such a simple yet profound way of putting it.
very true. The foundation of HingoriSutras has been laid by the teachings and philosophies of one of the greatest gurus to have touched the earth. That's Gurudev, the Mahaguru. At one point, his 1 point solution to evolution was Seva, Seva, and Seva. He selflessly served thousands of people, like what you said, till the next day, rather. And but he did not stop there. Before he left his body, he equipped another 100 of his disciples to carry that mandate by making them gurus. His stories are incredible, Devraj, like you just mentioned one of them, and his philosophy inspirational. So, dear audience, to hear the stories of this phenomenon, we request you to log on to gurudevonline.com and hear the podcasts that have been created especially for you. So it's gurudevonline.com. So please do log on to that website and hear every Thursday we have a new podcast being released. And with this, I would like to make a few announcements. Now, before we close for the night, I have a few things to share with you, dear audience. I'd like to tell you that we are, in a way, inventing HingoriSutras, and in order to bring you rich, meaningful live sessions and create deep content on our website, we will be continuing the live sessions just twice a month instead of every Sunday in the near future. So I would request each of you in the comment section, if you could type in your email IDs so that we could sort of share the updates with you. So please do, and intimate you on each session as they are arranged, and each video that we put up on the site and things like that. So please do type in your email IDs in the comment sessions today. Yeah. And the other announcement is a contest alert, like how Kanika just mentioned on our chat before. Seva has a snowball effect, and the more you do, the more it spreads. More people help and more are helped. It's time to share your Seva story with us, dear audience. We would like to hear from you on an act of selfless Seva you have performed without any monetary investment. The most innovative response stands a chance to win a gift from Karma Corner, the HingoriSutras shop. So what would you do? We've put up the details on the Facebook page, on our Insta page, but just to read it out to you, create a post on Facebook or Instagram. This could be a written message, a photo, a video created by you. Please, no forwards. This needs to be original ideas and contents, stating an act of Seva that can be done or has been done by you without spending money. Tag HingoriSutras and 3 more of your friends, asking them to post an act of selfless service. Don't forget to hashtag Seva Week. So we're going to be running a Seva Week this entire week. Post this on Instagram or on Facebook handles, and the winner will be announced on our next session on 15th August. So for you, audience, there is also a special offer on all our books on the site, www.HingoriSutras.in. Please do go on to HingoriSutras.in and avail of this offer that we've put up specially for you. And with that, I would really like to thank our panel today, Team HingoriSutras. With this, let's call it a night. Thank you, dear audience. Thank you for all the encouragement and all the messages that we've received. Really happy to have you with us today, and looking forward to seeing you next week. next Sunday. Good night, Shubh Ratri, Sayonara.